But first tonight, we're seeing utter hypocrisy from the Albanese government. Hamas is listed as a proscribed terror organisation in Australia. This means that members of Hamas are literally banned and could be prosecuted in this country. So there's the very real question over whether Australian government policy to allow Hamas supporters from the frontline of Gaza into Australia is contradicting its own laws. The heat should be firmly on the Prime Minister, his Foreign Minister and Tony Burke for radical policy lunacy. Yet instead, the focus today was on Peter Dutton. And Dutton was accused of racism for daring to suggest the Albanese government shouldn't be flying in terrorists from a war zone.
I seek to try to bring people together, not always looking for a wedge or to divide.
Stop being racist.
Leader of the opposition, order.
Well, it was an offensive and unparliamentary remark and it should be withdrawn.
Is a description of language being racist an unparliamentary remark?
Might you say something about the children that are being slaughtered?
Peter Dutton is the leader of the nasty party. It's Trumpian, it's despicable, and it needs to be called out.
The coalition's gone too far.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The last thing you want to be doing is heightening anger here in this country, and that's exactly what Peter Dutton's doing.
And many media outlets were equally as critical.
Good to see it. Are you a heartless racist? Do you have any humanity?
Mike Burgess says if there's no ideological support for Hamas, then not a problem. Don't you trust ASIO? They check if someone provided financial or material support to Hamas or if they have an ideology. So what else? And if they don't, they're fine to come in. What else do you want them to check?
Well, we've been reporting on this program for months now that security vetting is being done in as little as an hour, sometimes as well just a day. And in many occasions, it's not even sent to ASIO for checking at all. The Sydney Morning Herald, which, as you know, has a long history of anti-Israel coverage, called Dutton heartless, saying his hardline approach is cruel to people fleeing war. This has a human cost, and Dutton may find it has a political cost. But the reality is the precise opposite. It's heartless for Albanese to bring in potential terror supporters to Australia and put Australian lives at risk. Hamas doesn't only hate Jews, but all Westerners and the very values we all stand for. Not all Palestinians, of course, support Hamas, although so many are indoctrinated from birth to hate Jews. As we revealed on this show, as I said, for months now, because we have been exposing the security flaws, and this is journalism. There are enormous flaws in the security process to determine whether people coming to Australia from the war zone are genuine refugees or have a problematic history. It's not racism to be concerned about terrorists or their supporters coming to Australia, when social cohesion is already at breaking point and the terror threat level is rising. Foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan, put it perfectly when he writes that Australian government policy has been historically to be cautious about taking people from radicalised populations. He says that we can have and should have a generous refugee policy without accepting radicalised people. Sheridan asks, is it now Australian government policy that support for a terrorist organisation is not enough to disqualify someone from coming to Australia, indeed coming and settling permanently? And he describes this position as wildly radical new policy, which the government either has to explain or abandon. Sheridan says that if refugees are to be resettled, the United Nations preference is for that to be in their own region. And he points out that Gaza is surrounded by hundreds of millions of Arabic-speaking people in predominantly Muslim, Arab and North African countries, which are obvious places for refugees. Greg Sheridan argues that the government has got itself into an absurd situation, a completely ridiculous rhetorical bind in which it cannot even say that supporting a terrorist organisation disqualifies an applicant from coming to Australia. He says if that is the government's position, it should not hide behind ASIO, but actually tell us how it came to such a radical conclusion, that some support for a terrorist organisation is okay, and whether this is now Australian policy going forward. He says interrogating these issues is not remotely racist. But the Prime Minister has been unable to actually guarantee and promise Australians that rigorous security checks are being done in every instance. Unable to answer the questions about why some security checks are only taking 1 hour and why Hamas sympathisers could have already been let into the country. Well, they can't answer those questions, so the Albanese government can only attack Dutton. No answers, just emotional attacks. And Albanese seriously misled Australians today, and it was breathtaking to watch unfold live, because he claimed that ASIO Director General Mike Burgess had said that security checks were being done. Now, listen very carefully to the Prime Minister's remarks here.
I'll refer to what the ASIO Director General himself has said. If they've been issued a visa, they've gone through the process. They referred to my organisation and ASIO does its thing. It's a direct quote.
No, he stopped reading the direct quote halfway through. In the very next sentence, Mike Burgess said that not all visas had been sent to them in time. Have a listen to what Mike Burgess actually said.
So for all immigration, including when you're balancing humanitarian needs, security checks are critically important. There are processes in place, and I can assure your audience that when things get referred to ASIO, we deal with them effectively. Of course, there might be times when they didn't get referred to us in time. Once we become aware of them, we're able to do the assessments and deal with them effectively.
There might be times when they haven't been referred to us in time. That is what Mike Burgess said. That is what the Prime Minister did not read out in question time. This is deeply misleading of the Prime Minister to misquote Burgess and take him out of context, to leave out the part where the head of ASIO said, actually, not all Palestinian visa applicants were sent to us in time. It's too late when they're already in our country, when Tony Burke has said, oh, we can't, no government in its right mind would send anyone back to Gaza. Dutton then did point out that Albanese had misquoted Mike Burgess and asked him to correct the record. The Prime Minister refused to do so. Now, this entire topic is a fight that Peter Dutton is happy to have. There's no question most Australians would be highly concerned about Hamas sympathisers arriving in our country. Even the Sydney Morning Herald's Resolve poll found that only 10% of Australians wanted to accept Palestinian refugees. So as long as the coalition is speaking about whether to allow Hamas supporters into the country, well, Albanese looks shakier and weaker as Prime Minister. It seems his true character as a radical pro-Palestinian activist yelling into a microphone at a rally where the American flag was burned, well, this is now emerging and it poses a very real danger to our country.